Tonight, a deadly truck attack in New Orleans, just hours into the new year.
The screams, like I said, the screams of those girls. I mean,
a man drives his pickup into dozens of partiers.
Just barreling down the street, bro. Real life horror movie.
He appeared to be inspired by ISIS.
This is not just an act of terrorism. This is evil.
And police say he may not have acted alone. A devastating fire on northern Vancouver Island. Historic landmarks destroyed.
It was surreal. It was like a bad dream.
The blow to tourism and livelihoods in Telegraph Cove. Fueling lawsuits filed by the stars of a hit summer movie.
I think it's mostly just to try and get some of the public sentiment back onto his side.
Allegations of sexual harassment on set and a public smear campaign Justin Baldoni now says is liable.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hennemanson.
An urgent investigation is underway tonight in New Orleans after what officials are calling a terrorist attack. A man driving into crowds on the street, killing at least 15 people, injuring dozens more. The FBI now controls the crime scene where witnesses describe crowds scattering as a pickup truck ran down people celebrating the new year. It happened in the heart of New Orleans' famed French Quarter. Police say the truck turned onto historic Bourbon Street, driving onto the sidewalk to get around a parked police car, then speeding for about 2 city blocks before the driver got out and died in a shootout with officers. And in Katie Nicholson's report, which contains disturbing images and details, it doesn't end there. Explosives were found around the French Quarter, and police say there may be more suspects.
3 hours into the new year, and the streets of the French Quarter were packed when this video, obtained by Fox News, appears to show a white truck pull sharply around a police car blocking traffic and plow full speed through the crowd, leaving mangled bodies strewn on the road. The driver killed a few blocks away in a shootout with police. Witnesses grappled with the shock and horror of what they saw.
I remember the screeching and him gunning the car and the impact and the screams, like I said, the screams of those girls. I mean, yeah, I don't know that I'll be able to forget that.
Among the dead, a former college football player, an 18-year-old woman, and a 37-year-old father. The FBI identified the suspect as Shamsud Din Jabbar, American-born, a lifelong Texan who previously served in the U.S. Army. They found weapons, homemade bombs, and an ISIS flag in his truck. Police also say they found other explosive devices in the area, adding that the suspect may not have been a lone wolf.
We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates.
In an address to the nation, U.S. President Joe Biden shared new details about Jabbar's possible motives.
That mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill.
As investigators in New Orleans collected evidence, police descended on a North Houston neighborhood and set up a perimeter around a home where they believe Jabbar lived. This was supposed to be a big day for the Big Easy, hosting the Sugar Bowl, a major college football game.
It's in the best interest of everybody and public safety that we postpone the game for 24 hours.
And for his part, the Louisiana governor took great pains to assure fans of just how secure the arena will be. He said he too would be in the stands for the game.
Katie, officials did face questions about why those bollards, the big concrete and metal barriers that usually protect pedestrians from these kinds of attacks, weren't in place.
Yeah, so because the city is hosting the Super Bowl, the mayor said that they were actually in the midst of an infrastructure upgrade. A new bollard system is being built to bolster security for that event. So as a contingency plan, the New Orleans police said they had squad cars parked across the top of the street, but clearly in this case, those measures weren't enough.
Katie Nicholson in Washington. In his national address, the U.S. president also said investigators were looking for any links to an unexplained and fatal explosion of a Tesla Cybertruck outside of the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas.
Cybertruck just blew up with fireworks. It just came in. I just moved over there from over here.
Unverified video appears to show the moment after the explosion and what sounds like fireworks. The hotel was evacuated. One person inside the truck died. Investigators still working to confirm their identity.
Our second objective is to determine whether this was an act of terrorism or not. I know everybody's interested in that word and trying to see if we can say, hey, this is a terrorist attack. That is our goal, and that's what we're trying to do.
Among those suggesting a terrorist link, Tesla's CEO and advisor to the incoming Donald Trump administration, Elon Musk, who said both the Cybertruck and the truck used in New Orleans were rented by the same company. Investigators said they were looking into any connection between the two incidents. U.S. prosecutors say authorities seized the largest stockpile of homemade explosives in FBI history last month in rural Virginia. More than 150 pipe bombs and other explosive materials, some of them stored in a backpack labeled No Lives Matter. That's the name of an online network promoting violent extremism. A tip from a neighbor brought the suspect to the FBI's attention after allegedly he blew 3 fingers off his hand, making one of the devices. He is currently facing a gun charge. In British Columbia, devastating fire has ravaged a number of landmarks in a small community on Vancouver Island. It took firefighters nearly 6 hours to get the flames under control after it broke out early Tuesday morning. The village of Telegraph Cove is on the north end of Vancouver Island. It's a popular tourist destination for whale watching. Luckily, no one was injured, but as Yvette Brend explains, the damage to the community and the surrounding area is gutting.
The tiny community woke to flames before dawn.
The trees here are huge, huge trees, and the flames were higher than the trees. Some of those trees were on fire, and so it was really frightening.
Fire crews came from other towns, and by boat it took 20 minutes.
I was dressed before he even called us because I knew we were coming, and it was fully involved when we got here.
Flames destroyed a historic home, part of the boardwalk, a pub, a cafe, a whale watching office, and a whale museum with a large collection of marine mammal skeletons.
I came home. I didn't think I could handle it. And then we went back down a bit later, and the Whale Interpretive Center and Prince of Wales office, it was all fully engulfed, and we watched it come down, and it was surreal. It was like a bad dream.
Telegraph Cove is a small village of just 20 people, built from an old sawmill town. Home to BC's first whale watching company, it drives tourism on northern Vancouver Island.
This is devastating for everybody. It's devastating for the owners for the Cove and the Whale Museum, but also the North Island. This is a major employer for the North Island.
That entire area was completely rebuilt about 35 years ago. So it's been down before, and I'm very hopeful and optimistic that it is able to rebuild.
A new year, bringing new hope.
Yesterday we felt defeated and exhausted, and this morning we are feeling encouraged, and we are feeling so hopeful for the future of Telegraph Cove.
Fire and insurance officials arrive tomorrow, and RCMP have secured the area. It's not clear what could have sparked such an inferno. Stores were closed to visitors over the holidays. Yvette Brend, CBC News, Vancouver.
Investigators have successfully extracted data from one of the black boxes from the South Korean jet that crashed last weekend. They now have voice recordings from the cockpit. The plane's other black box, the flight data recorder, was badly damaged, so it's being sent to the U.S. for further analysis. 179 people died on Saturday when the jet crashed into a wall shortly after landing on its belly and skidding down the runway. 2 people survived. An American who fled the country after being convicted for his role in the January 6th riot is now seeking political asylum in Canada. Anthony Vo should be serving time in a U.S. federal prison, but instead he's spending time in the BC mountains. As Caroline Bargout found out, he's counting on clemency when Donald Trump returns to the White House.
Anthony Vo is supposed to be behind bars in the U.S. Instead, he's hitting the slopes in Whistler, BC, hoping U.S. President Donald Trump will pardon him and others involved in the January 6th insurrection.
He's already made too many promises in the public spotlight that it would look really bad if he didn't. And he's a man of his word, so.
Vo and his mother were among hundreds of Americans who stormed the Capitol building on January 6, 2021, protesting Trump's defeat in the 2020 election. Last year, the 32-year-old was convicted of 4 misdemeanors and sentenced to 9 months in jail. Rather than reporting to prison in June, Vo packed up his snowboard and headed north to claim asylum in Canada. Experts say it'll be a tough case to make.
So we'll always give people the benefit of the doubt and hear their claim and evaluate it. So I'm not surprised that they're hearing it. That's how our process works. We give everybody a fair hearing. But I would be extremely surprised if this was a successful claim.
In his asylum claim, Vo says he was targeted, persecuted, maltreated, arrested, subjected to unfair trial, and even sentenced because of his political beliefs. He also alleges J6ers have been subjected to torture and inhumane treatment by the government and fears he will suffer the same fate.
I know a lot of people disagree with me being here, but I've also received a lot of support from people here, and I'm really grateful to be here.
He's still waiting for a hearing date, which could take up to a year. Vo's plan is to be home for the start of the Lunar New Year at the end of the month, but only if he gets a pardon by then. If not, he will continue to fight for asylum in Canada. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Toronto.
Quebec MPs are ramping up the pressure on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to step aside as leader. According to sources, the Quebec Liberal caucus wants him to resign following the Ontario and Atlantic groups. David Thurton now on the mounting challenges facing Trudeau early in this new year.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is on holiday, away from Parliament Hill, reflecting on his future. But for increasingly more MPs, the decision is clear.
The consensus was that the Prime Minister should step away.
This Quebec Liberal has made it clear for some time she wants Trudeau to go. Now, more of her fellow MPs are joining the call.
That has been the consensus that was communicated to the caucus chair, and that he was meant to convey to the National Caucus chair.
According to sources, the Quebec caucus chair has been consulting with MPs in the province. The chair would not confirm the details. But Liberals in Ontario and Atlantic Canada regional Liberal caucuses have signaled that Trudeau should resign. A new public opinion poll by Angus Reid shows support for the Liberals is at an all-time low, at just 16%. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's approval rating is also plummeting, now 22%.
These are numbers that are going to really strike the ultimate level of fear into the survival of the party, at least in the short term.
It comes after the explosive resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland earlier this month. This leaves the Prime Minister with little choice, according to some.
I think everybody's expectation is that at the beginning of this month, the Prime Minister will return to Ottawa and will announce he's resigning.
Political strategists say the party has to consider what happens next and how it will deal with opposition parties who want to topple the Liberal government as soon as Parliament returns at the end of January.
Well, I think prorogation is necessary because the NDP have stated that they will vote down the government at the first confidence motion that's available to them.
Liberals are already preparing for a future without Trudeau. CBC obtained an email circulated among Liberal caucus members. It outlines potentially a path forward that includes prorogation and a short leadership race. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Flipping a home in BC just got a lot more expensive. As of January 1st, the province is imposing a 20% tax on the profits of a home that's sold within a year of buying it. After that, the tax falls incrementally until the 2-year mark when it drops to zero. Some exceptions do apply. The province says the move aims to make homes more affordable. While much of the world is incentivizing electric vehicles to encourage their use, Alberta is set to tax them. Beginning early this year, EV owners will pay an extra $200 fee when registering their vehicle. The province says the tax is vital to maintain highways, but as Alexander Silberman reports, some drivers think the government is taking the wrong turn.
For Eugene Masakwi, it's about to get more expensive to keep his fully electric car on the road.
It was a bit of a shock knowing I'd have to pay $200 compared to the, I believe, about $90 it is now just for the gas car.
Alberta is about to become the second province to add a tax for EVs, following Saskatchewan in 2021. It argues the extra registration fee is necessary because EV owners don't pay a fuel tax, which is used to fund highway maintenance. It also says electric vehicles are harder on pavement because of their heavy batteries.
I think all Albertans would like to do their part in making sure we can maintain our highway infrastructure.
While the idea is still new to Canada, more than 24 U.S. states already charge extra registration fees to make up for lost gas tax revenue. 6, including Georgia, Iowa, and Kentucky, also collect a tax at charging stations.
It's clearly counterproductive to the times that we're in.
This EV advocate says everyone should pay their fair share, but he argues extra fees could discourage drivers from going electric.
We should be encouraging people and finding ways to facilitate the transition to electric mobility, and this sort of flies in the face of that.
If the tax is going to be used to actually improve infrastructure...
In Edmonton, Masakwi says driving an EV is still well worth it for the planet and his wallet.
I'm looking at the savings I have in gas, so I'm able to stomach that, offset it a bit more.
He might not mind, but experts say striking a balance between encouraging electric and paying for infrastructure is a work in progress. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
Ukraine is putting more pressure on Russia by halting its flow of gas to Europe.
Prices will go up. And that's really bad for Europe's economies, which are basically still struggling to come out of recession.
But will it make a difference in Moscow? The rift between two Hollywood stars is growing.
So if you look at his complaint, he points out certain text messages that were lifted out of context.
More details emerge on what went on behind the scenes during a tense press tour. And one of the most iconic shots from the Paris Olympics in our Moment Countdown.
I'm happy to be a part of this.
We're back in 2. Three days of official mourning had begun in Montenegro after a bar brawl turned into a mass shooting. At least 10 people were killed, including 2 children, after an angry patron went home to get a gun. When he returned, he shot the bar owner, the owner's children, and members of his own family. The 45-year-old shooter later died from self-inflicted wounds. He had a history of violence. Power has been restored to most of Puerto Rico after another massive outage Tuesday left the majority of the island in the dark. Officials say a critical grid failure caused the blackout. At its peak, 1.4 million customers were without power. The chronic outages are linked to a crumbling infrastructure that was also badly damaged in a powerful hurricane in 2017. Ukraine has cut off the flow of Russian gas through its borders to Europe. Those still reliant on it are already feeling the impact. As Sarah Levitt tells us, on the same day the deal ended, Moscow launched another deadly attack on Kyiv.
The moment Russian drones hit buildings in central Kyiv, killing 2, the damage extensive, entire apartments destroyed. No reprieve on the first day of the new year in Russia's war with Ukraine, and now an energy agreement between the countries is over.
Quite a lot of it is actually symbolic. This ends pretty much half a century of Russian gas transit through Ukraine into Western Europe.
The natural gas flowed through a Soviet-era pipeline running from Sudza to Ozerod on the Ukrainian border with Slovakia. Gas worth between $5 to $7 billion a year, keeping lights on and homes warm. The failure to reach an agreement unsurprising, but comes with economic consequences.
Prices will go up. And that's really bad for Europe's economies, which are basically still struggling to come out of recession.
Prices may go up, but European countries' dependency on Russian gas has decreased significantly since the country launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russian gas made up around 40% of all gas imports in 2021. It's less than 10% now. Some countries, though, will struggle more than others, still dependent on Russian gas. People in Moldova's Transnistria region are already seeing power cuts, and in Slovakia, The Prime Minister says the country stands to lose hundreds of millions of euros due to the stoppage. The pro-Russian leader says the decision will have drastic impacts on the EU, but won't hurt Russia, something Volodymyr Zelensky disagrees with. In his New Year's address, the Ukrainian president highlighted incoming U.S. President Donald Trump's wish for an end to the war or a ceasefire, conditions of which could include getting the pipeline running again and the gas flowing. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, London.
Actor Justin Baldoni has responded to allegations of a smear campaign against his co-star Blake Lively with a $250 million lawsuit.
I think it's mostly just to try and get some of the public sentiment back onto his side.
The latest in an escalating dispute between the two stars. And the Canadians who got personal about their roads to success.
Oh boy, well, I had a lot of hair back then.
We revisit some of our best conversations from 2024.
As a young kid, I grew up dreaming of playing in the NHL. That sounds pretty crazy to say.
The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next.
Oh, they've done it.
Canadian tennis star Gabriela Dabrowski winning a historic mixed doubles bronze at the Paris Olympic Games last summer. She has now revealed she did it while battling breast cancer. The three-time Grand Slam doubles champion said she got the diagnosis 4 months before the Games, but paused treatment so she could play in Paris. Newly filed lawsuits are escalating the public fight between film star Blake Lively and her co-star and director Justin Baldoni. Their accusations give us a rare inside look at Hollywood's publicity machine and how it can be weaponized. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson takes us through the allegations.
Appearing separately on the red carpet this summer, co-stars in the blockbuster It Ends With Us were clearly at odds. Now they've filed competing lawsuits. Actor and director Justin Baldoni accuses the New York Times of libel in a December story that reported on allegations by Blake Lively that Baldoni hired a PR firm to try to ruin her reputation. It's a claim echoed by Lively in the sexual harassment complaint she filed against Baldoni in California.
If you look at his complaint, he points out certain text messages that were lifted out of context. For example, there were emojis, there was certain language that was not reported on by the Times.
The Times quoted emails and texts allegedly sent by publicists hired by Baldoni, including the line, "We can bury anyone." The New York Times tells CBC News the story was responsibly reported and based on a review of thousands of pages of original documents. On the same day that Baldoni sued the Times, Lively took her harassment claim to federal court and added accusations of emotional and mental distress. Back in the summer, some fans took offense with how Lively promoted the film about a woman making her way out of an abusive relationship.
Blake Lively is presenting it as a fun time for your girlfriends. Wear your floral dresses to the movies, sort of a Barbie kind of thing. And then you have Justin Baldoni talking much more seriously about the darker elements of the story. And that just fell in line with people who were looking for that to be called out.
But Lively's allegations present a different picture about who is villain and victim in real life. One that Baldoni hopes to muddy with his own libel lawsuit, says this pop culture columnist.
I think it's mostly just to try and get some of the public sentiment back onto his side. I do think it will work to an extent.
In the court of public opinion, the saga of It Ends With Us seems nowhere near ending. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
I get to speak to some fascinating Canadians in the Sunday interviews. So let's look back at some of the highlights from 2024, beginning with a well-known broadcaster whose start in the business might surprise you. I want to show you some video from, I think, 1978.
That's when I was at the Science Center.
Bob McDonald says the Soviets have shown that weightlessness is not an obstacle for long space flights.
Now the body adjusts itself to that slightly. You do get a little bit shorter. Your cheeks rise up a little bit, so your face changes. You get better vision and you get better hearing when you've been living in space for a very long time.
All right. Okay.
Wow.
So when you look at that, especially now, what do you think?
Oh boy, well, I had a lot of hair back then. That was before I started dyeing it gray like I do now. Yeah, that was pretty well. That's what happened. I was at the Science Center, and the media would call up and they say, "Can you come and talk to us about Soviets in space or this thing that just landed on Mars?" And I always said yes. And what came out of that was every time I did that, they said, "Hey, you're good on camera. Do you want to do more? You want to come back?" And I said, "Sure." And it just blossomed, and one thing led to another. But yeah, it just seems so long ago. I love the big collar too. It was very nice. And I was also living an alternative lifestyle at that time. That's why I had the hair down to here. So.
Well, I'll tell you what I see. I first of all see very much of you today in that guy then. You're just a fantastic communicator. Like you can just in the way you're speaking, how comfortable you are, how articulate, it is a gift that you definitely have. But the other thing you've had in your life, and you've touched on it already, is when somebody offers you an opportunity, as surprising and audacious as it might be, you say yes.
I've always said yes. That's been the story of my life. My life hasn't been planned at all. Opportunities come along. We all have that happen. You've had it happen. Somebody says, "Hey, so-and-so's looking for someone. You'd be good at that. Give him a call." And when that's happened, I've said yes, and it's changed my life a number of times.
Hi, I'm Bob McDonald, and I'm curious about everything. The big revolution that came in timekeeping was when we introduced the pendulum. Having something swing back and forth. You will give me all your money. Waves. I'm fascinated with waves.
But here we have a conversion.
You write about such big things, major shifts in society, but I also think you're somebody who's been very much influenced by your parents, the very micro way. So tell me about that. In what way have they shaped the person you are in 2024?
Well, you and I have something in common. You have two parents. You have two parents in the West Indies.
Yeah.
I have one.
Yep.
But we were immigrants to Canada in the early 1970s. My dad was English. My mom's Jamaican, which makes there's nothing more Canadian than coming from a Commonwealth country to Canada in the 1970s.
Yep.
So in that sense, I regard myself as a paradigmatic Canadian. My father was a mathematician at the University of Waterloo. My mother was a writer and a family therapist. So. You know, the real simple way to understand my writing and my approach is this is what happens when you have a father who is deeply analytical and a mother who is, deeply curious about how human beings and the way they work. I'm what happens when you mash that up.
Your mother is still living.
She is, very much.
Your father, unfortunately, has passed, but you wrote a tribute to him, an obituary, and you talked about how he only felt that he was an expert in three things, but beyond that was curious about how other people, saw the world. And I feel that is kind of maybe describes you a little bit.
My father was, the exact phrase was, he was an expert in three things: mathematics, the Bible, and gardening. On everything else, he was open to suggestion.
There you go.
And he established a powerful model for me growing up of someone who was deeply curious about the world. And a necessary part of curiosity is humility. You have to admit that you don't know everything there is to know about a subject. And I have tried to stay intellectually humble throughout my career to maintain my curiosity. I always feel like there's someone out there who can teach me something new about a subject.
Right behind him, and they get a chance. Dunn motors in, and a save. Rebound, score!
The NHL's the greatest hockey league in the world, and I've heard players talk about that moment where they pulled on the uniform and stepped on the ice for the first time. You've now had that moment where you stood behind the bench in an exhibition game for the first time. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a flood of emotions. You know, I think as a young kid, I grew up dreaming of playing in the NHL. That sounds pretty crazy to say, but that's what was out there for us to see, and I played boys hockey. So to know that despite the pathway that I had as a young female athlete and hockey player, and to be here now in this position, I'm just humbled, I'm grateful, and it's an unbelievable feeling being behind it all now.
You know, the thing that struck me the most watching the practice, and it sounds almost odd to say it out loud, is that you were just a coach out there. You know, the way the players interacted with you, the way that you ran the drills, like there wasn't a moment where I was watching that where it seemed odd at all.
I mean, I think it's kind of the point. I put my skates on the same way as everybody else and approach my work the same way. And I know that this still appears new and different, and me being in this position is potentially more new to the guys than it is for me. Like I see them as hockey players, and it doesn't matter if I'm working with Team Canada national women's team player or an NHLer. Like the work, the focus is on them and how to help them. And so how I go about my work and how I go about my communication with them, it's got the whistle, you got the board, you got the video, and you got the drills. And so it's really exciting. I think that, you know, the experiences that I've had, especially in my time coaching as a power skating coach, getting to kind of create my own style, communication style, come through with on my own path to then get to apply that to the American Hockey League and really tighten that up to then bring it here to Seattle. I think it's just an organic process, and it's probably what you're witnessing.
You may not have seen a lot of other faces that looked like yours when you were really young playing hockey, but you certainly saw a lot of elite athletes just in your family, right? I mean, your aunt, who was a basketball star at Syracuse, your cousins, Kia, a basketball star, professional player, Darnell, a professional hockey player. So it sounds like a fantastic environment to achieve success. What about being a girl growing up in Hamilton playing hockey? Did you feel there were any obstacles there?
I think from a very young age, because Darnell and I are the exact same age, we played the same sport, and our paths always ran parallel to each other. And I always noticed how him and his career was spoken about versus mine. So we were both elite. We were both at the top of our age groups, our teams, our province, our country. And I remember whenever he was spoken about, it was like, well, he's going to make a living playing this. This is going to be his full-time career. He can 100% focus his time on this. Whereas me, it wasn't spoken about like that. It was spoken about, oh, you need to get an education because when you're done doing the little thing that you're doing, you're going to need something else to do. Mm-hmm. And so my career and me playing my sport wasn't taken as seriously as his was. But that was because there was no professional hockey for women. Mm-hmm. And the lack of opportunities was glaring to the people who I looked up to, the people around me, and they wanted to make sure that I had my things in order so that I could be as successful as possible outside of hockey.
Well, Champs, the high school championships in Jamaica, is the very best on the planet. Right, so it's not just there's nothing remotely close to that anywhere else. I mean, not just in Canada, but any other country in the world. And you see the grassroots training. You see the passion that these kids have. You can actually see how sports completely affects their self-esteem as to how it is that they fit in society. I mean, if you go to Champs, even to this day, you will see. Kingston College versus Calabar versus Jamaica College versus Monroe, Wolmer's. These are all the really big, popular, well-funded city schools that are fiercely competitive as to who the best organized school team or track team is on the island.
But you were from a country school.
I am from a country school.
But you won a Champs.
Yes, I did not win a Champs.
You didn't?
No. Champs is no.
Oh.
I did not. I was fifth in the 100 meters, and our relay team was fourth. Listen, country school again, coming from country to the city, where you're seeing the big intimidating schools and all the colors and The pageantry, yeah, it was. I think we got a little scared. I got to say, we got a little scared. I mean, there's an incredibly rich history, you know, from the early 1900s of fantastic athletes from the island, and I was just one of them. I happen to be one of them, and I'm blessed to be part of that.
Superstar chef Matty Matheson opens up about cooking his best.
We're all broken. How do you put yourself back together every day?
More from our marquee conversations next. Let's return to some of my favorite moments from the Sunday interviews, beginning with the singer Allison Russell. She had a difficult childhood in Montreal, a city that ended up saving her.
There was a period of my life where I did not think I was worth anything, and it was a very near thing in my early childhood whether I was going to survive that situation or not. I was lucky to be in Montreal because Montreal is a city with free public art at its heart. So I had the benefit of incredible public libraries. I had the benefit of the Jazz Fest. I had the benefit of Caravana. I had the benefit of Shakespeare in the Park and Repercussion Theater and the students at the McGill Conservatory giving free concerts. And so I was able to sustain this activism of the imagination that was fueled by my access to public art and literature and books to read of there's other ways to live. This is maybe this doesn't have to be the end of my story, right? I think nothing can change in our reality if we can't imagine it first. So I think there's a kind of an activism of the imagination that is fed and nurtured by the arts, and also empathy. That's how we grow our empathy. That's the currency of art, is empathy, and we need that desperately when we're in terrible situations, when we're working through trauma. But just in life, we need it.
Speaking of the Emmys, you gave an acceptance speech on behalf of the show.
Yeah.
Which was astounding.
Yeah.
There was a line in there where you talked about how we're all broken inside.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, we're all broken. I'm sure you had good news and bad news this week about people you love. How do you put yourself back together every day? How do you maintain this persona? How do you work? How do you show up for yourself? How do you show up for others around you? How do you stay strong? How do you, it's so intense. And restaurants are it's like a play. Every day we open for service. Every day a group of individuals have to get everything ready and then cook to the best of their abilities, no matter what's going on. You know, that's everybody. Everyone has, if you're working at a factory or a CFO or you're doing whatever you're doing, every single person here with the cameras and lights, everyone's coming from something. And it's just we gotta as a society, we gotta be there for each other. We gotta good or bad, we gotta be there. We gotta be positive. We gotta really try to make everyone kind of come up together, you know?
Is there a line that you would not allow one of your comics to cross?
Absolutely not.
So a comic could come up here on amateur night and make a joke about the Holocaust?
Sure.
Really?
Of course. Well, you're forgetting the fact that, I don't know when it was, but we did a festival of Holocaust jokes very early on.
I did not know that. Are you serious?
Yeah, it's not exactly a famous thing. But you know, sick humor is what you need for a sick society, for a sick culture. And I do believe that the culture we live in is kind of sick, and the only response to it is to own that sickness.
And so what if the comedy seemed to be hateful or made fun of people who were sitting here and made them uncomfortable?
You're talking about my act now. It all depends on the audience laughing. If the audience doesn't laugh, then it doesn't go on stage for very long. We wouldn't promote somebody who didn't get laughs. The audience does not come here to hate. The audience comes here to laugh. So, you know, the audience has the ability to censor the acts by either not laughing or laughing. And if they're laughing, it's probably within the realm of acceptability.
So Jerry Seinfeld has recently been saying that the left is destroying or has destroyed comedy. He talks about PC crap. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't find that it's ruined comedy because I'm doing exactly the same thing I've been doing for the last 48 years, but I work on a really nice small scale. It's really not that hard for me to sell 200 seats a night in my clubs. I'm going to find 200 people a night that really don't care about being, precisely not hurting anybody's feelings, because that's not really what comedy is all about. So what Jerry is talking about, of course, are much bigger concerts and things like that. But there's always been censorship. There's always been a problem. It's just that the targets have changed. When I first opened up, 1976, 1978, people were appalled and would leave. A third of the audience would leave because of the language. It wasn't the topics, it was the language. 4-letter words, never heard before on a Canadian stage, and repetitive over and over and over and over again.
And the other thing is, in a pre-internet era, pre-cable TV era, there are probably people in that audience who never heard those words, right? Or at least not in the same way.
Well, they didn't hear them in church, that's for sure.
So you have a fine arts degree from Mount Allison University.
Yes.
That is a school that has had some incredibly heralded artists that spent their entire lives creating beautiful painting. You became an editorial cartoonist. Why?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a painter. So I consider myself less of a successful cartoonist, more of a failed painter. Now, I know that cartooning has been really good for me, and that does, I'm very fortunate to have had my career in cartooning. I don't want to get you wrong. But I really set out to be a painter, like a gallery painter, not a commercial artist. Cartooning just started taking off faster for whatever reason.
And you love it?
Oh, I love it, yeah. I get to draw every day. I never had to grow up. I mean, cartoonists never had to become adults. They play every day. I'm so fortunate to be able to make art on a daily basis. But I also would like to return to painting, so I have been doing some painting now.
So if you were to go back to Mount A and talk to the fine arts graduating class of 2025, knowing what you do about the state of editorial cartooning, your own career, what's been good, what's been bad, what would you tell them?
Well, if you're thinking of going to newspapers, I might dissuade them. I don't know, it's hard to say because there's also another threat to artists, and it's AI, and it's going to get more difficult, I think, as AI really takes over the universe.
Okay, it's time for the reveal. Let's see it.
All right, here you go.
So you know that grossly distorts my height.
Yes, and I do realize that we're probably the same height. But we were talking about how people, the first thing they notice about you is that you're not as tall as they thought you would be.
Yeah.
So that's where this comes from.
And I'm standing on a soapbox.
And you're standing on a soapbox.
Fantastic. Very well done.
All right. There we go.
Next, a photographer's stunning image of an Olympic surfer.
Good condition, good waves, good light, and a bit of luck.
How he caught the mid-air pose in our moment. This holiday season, the National is bringing you a countdown of the most popular moments from the last year. If you've ever tried surfing, you know catching a wave is hard, and with the pressure of the Olympics, it's even more difficult. But capturing the perfect moment of celebration, well, that makes our moment countdown.
At first, I just looked on my camera, so I did not see all the detail, alignments of the board, the leash, the Gabrielle almost walking on the cloud. For myself, it was just a practical shot. Good condition, good waves, good light, and a bit of luck. Gabriel Medina got the luck because he got the best wave of the day, and I took the shots. I probably got the best shot of the day. I'm happy to be a part of this. These shots catch the attention of all the people in all the world, no matter which sport they are looking for. And so I think it's one of the best promotions for sports I love. Gabriel just sent me a text, a message on Instagram, just telling me congratulations for the shots, and I just congratulate him back.
I've heard this from other photographers before, that combination of being at the right place at the right time and having both skill and luck, but also these days for photographers, automatically all those images get sent to an editor, and sometimes the photographer gets taken by surprise with, first of all, what they have, and secondly, how viral it got, and that's exactly what happened here. Thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing in Vancouver. Good night.